Continue with our review. Item 10A, reviews proposed revisions to local board policy, and we will start with board policy BQ local. Dr. Dupree.
I think Beth is prepared to do a brief discussion or lead the discussion on this. Beth?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dupree. All right, so for BQ Local, we did receive some board questions and some suggested revisions. So you have received this evening at your place a revised copy of BQ Local, and I'll just walk you through some of the minor changes and hit some board questions to guide our discussion as we move through. One of the revisions that you'll notice in the first paragraph under purpose is that we made statement, plural, as statements. And I'm not going to point out all of those minor changes. I just want to draw your attention to some have been made. We did receive a couple of questions under the section titled Strategic Planning Process, and that was inserted and new to this local policy based on our review and revision work with some board members. The questions that I think need to be discussed this evening are, is this portion adequate and accurate, or do we need a little bit more information to be more specific about our strategic planning process in particularly? Do we want to drive it from put some wording in there that shows the board governance level to the board goals and objectives to the DSP or district strategic plan and then down to the action level?
Do you want to talk about that right now? So that was me that sent, I'm sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mrs. Toussaint, for yielding the floor. Apologize for that. So that was me that sent in that question because some of the language we've started using in the vision planning process is talking about, you know, a board governance plan, which is the board level strategic plan, and then out of that would come, you know, that would be kind of a long-term plan, you know, 5 to 10 year lookout, and then we would have from that board goals or district goals, I think is the vernacular we've used. We'd have objectives under those like we do now. And then from that, what we've been calling the district strategic plan is a kind of the action plan under that, which is, we have that now also. So I just wondered if we wanted, so because the way the language is here, the district strategic plan will be developed from the district goals and objectives. That's accurate, but there isn't that, you know, that long-range plan or the board governance plan, that isn't mentioned in here where those goals and objectives would come from. So that was my thought on that section.
So did you have anything? So I did have some, my question was, because I've been using the term strategic plan to refer to the high level governance plan that we're working on with the Vision and Planning Committee. So I just wanted to make sure that we didn't get our terminology confused. So I think that's what you're pointed out. So I view the strategic plan as sort of the high level plan that we are developing through the Vision and Planning Committee, and I always view the I guess the action plan, like the district, and I don't know if that's the right term to use, but you guys developing from that your points of action. And I think that's what you're referring to as the strategic plan currently. But I always kind of thought it was really more the strategic plan as the high level, and then the action plan sort of flows from that, because you have the strategic plan, which is goals, and then objectives come under that, and then you have action plan that comes under that. I don't know. That's the way I always viewed it. So it would make more sense to me to organize it that way. I don't know if anybody else has any input, but that's my 2 cents.
Listening to the questions or the comments, I think maybe as I reread the section on strategic planning process, the district and campus improvement planning process is a mandated process that must be done in its complete way, comprehensively, annually. So there's not a lot of give there that's in code. But I'm just wondering, Grail, if the strategic planning process, if we could just beef that up a little bit to more clearly define that, for example, the sentence that begins a district strategic plan, if maybe that needs to go to the beginning of that section to say the strategic plan is designed to be a long-term plan to support these things that is a visionary, and get some of those key words in, long-term, visionary, strategic, and then from that flow the boards, it supports the mission and those things. So would just a few words in a reorganization address what you're asking, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. So I definitely think, I absolutely think that would work. And then from that long-range strategic plan, if that's the language we're going to use, then from that comes the short-term goals and objectives, which then there's the action plan that supports those. So the action plan is the responsibility of the administration. Setting the district goals and objectives is the responsibility of the board. And setting the long-range plan, or what Mrs. Toussaint calls the district strategic plan, is the job of the board as well.
Okay. I think we
agree.
can pretty easily edit this and get it ready for next week still.
Okay, that's good. In that same section, it talks about that the strategic plan will be presented to the board periodically. I don't know what that's referring to, if that means that, if that's referring to the action plans, but maybe that part should just, I don't know. I'm not sure in how that really fits in. So,
Yeah. Because I don't know, we don't need to see the action plan at this level.
No.
And if we're creating the strategic plan, which is the governing plan, then that really doesn't fit. So-
right, and I actually think maybe that whole sentence doesn't fit either, because the policy that we have in place that covers that is the management oversight policy. And if we're doing management oversight, then the plan of the departments and the activities of the department will come to us on a periodic rotating basis.
I'm wondering, though, if the intent of that sentence is to address the fact that it is I'm kind of looking at it through another lens, that it is designed to be a long-term plan. So the board will review it periodically, but at least every 3 years. So it's the idea that it's probably a 2 and 3 year plan that'll be reviewed as needed,
And
but at
updated.
least every 3 years.
So maybe not presented to, but reviewed and updated.
Reviewed and updated instead of presented to.
Yeah.
Because I think in this sentence, strategic plan is actually referring to something else. But if we're using strategic plan to mean the long-term strategic plan, then having it be reviewed and updated by the board at least every 3 years is appropriate.
Yep, I agree.
But not the action plans. That would come to us they will be developed from the board set goals and objectives, and they can be given to us as information, but it's not for us to intermeddle in that, and we should be hearing about them through the management oversight process.
Well, I'm not, I guess, I hear what you're saying about it, management oversight process, but if you think in terms of the board's adopted a long-term plan, and annually we do that action plan, I think we're always going to share that action plan with the board, just so you know what's in it. And we'd probably do quarterly updates on that plan, maybe not publicly, but online, because I think once it's adopted, we would want even that all to be online for the community to see. So we would definitely want the board to be engaged with that, not for approval and all of that, but just because I think the way the policy's written on the management oversight, there's some things the board would not see more, it's in every 2 or 3 years.
Right, but wouldn't that be in the form of what you would be bringing to us would be the management plans? For example, the curriculum management plan, the technology plans, those kinds, I've forgotten the names of them. But those are the kinds of plans you're going to bring to us, not so much the action plan, task plans, although those are in there as part of that. And we're not approving any of that. We're just informationally getting it.
Yeah.
But to get the action plan without getting the context of the total, say, curriculum management plan, I'm not sure that helps us a lot. I'm happy to take whatever information you want to give us. I just don't want to bog down the process so much that there's this constant updating and reporting that has to happen that we can't execute on any of this
Amen.
stuff.
We agree with that.
Well, so with those comments, if you guys could take it back, provide another updated version, get it out to us this week before the board meeting, and then if we have other comments, we can either call or send them in via email.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
We'll be
Sound
ready.
good?
Thank you.
Okay, so our next policy is EG Local. Mrs. Martinez, assume that's you again.
All right, and EG Local is, again, a revised copy that was delivered to you this evening at your place. And just as a kind of a reminder at how you're looking at this a little bit differently, because you don't see as many track changes. This was the board's policy originally, and so the updates that were provided when we started talking with board members, this really became a reset or a restart on this policy. And so when you received it last week, it did not have any track changes because it was a reset. And so you will notice a few track changes based on some board input this week, and that's why you have the track changes in this document. And so I'll draw your attention to one of those areas, and it is in the overview section. And the question came about what is in the fourth line down, second paragraph, fourth line down, strategic priorities. And as we were working on the revision, it was our understanding that that was in reference to the board's priorities. And so that's been updated to reflect board's priorities, but certainly open to discussion and making sure that we're representing the thinking behind that.
Sounds right. Okay, yes.
Okay, well, can I make a comment?
Yes. Did you have additional presentation, or did you want us to discuss just that portion or the whole
We can
thing?
discuss that and then
Okay,
move forward.
Go ahead, Mrs. James.
Well, I don't know if that is, so board's priorities, this year we have priorities because we had a lot of goals and then we sort of focused in on what we're calling priorities.
Right.
I'm not sure we normally would have priorities. I think we normally would have goals and objectives, and hopefully there wouldn't be too many of them that we'd have to prioritize them for any given year. So, so maybe it's really the district's goals is what that needs to be.
Okay.
Or the board's goals and objectives, which we said we were going to call the district's goals, I think.
So I agree with that, but I would also think that at least for this particular year, since we do have priorities, maybe we need to include it for this year and either revisit it if we don't have them next year, or perhaps we put something in that says priorities, if any, have been designated or something along those lines. I would just think that since we do have them this year, we might want to consider leaving it, and then perhaps if we change the terminology when we adopt a strategic plan and goals and objectives, then maybe we just need to update the terminology. That's just a suggestion.
Okay, we can work
Does
on the...
anybody have any other? Do you have any? Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
All right, another question that is just overall about this policy, and it goes back to our profile of a graduate discussion earlier, is with the profile of a graduate being that end product, then where does that fit within the policy, or where does that live now within this policy? We're beginning with the end in mind and driving everything toward meeting the profile of a graduate.
Could it be an exhibit on this policy?
I think that's a good idea.
Yes.
And then when the policy comes back to us in the future for review, then that can be part of the review if necessary.
Would it reside under EG Local, though, as an exhibit, or would it be more up where the the governing policies are like the core beliefs and commitments and that kind of thing, so
Maybe.
that all travels together.
Well, I don't know where it would reside, but maybe that somebody, that one of your TASB people can give advice on that. It seems, well, let me ask this. Is it the curriculum and the curriculum, the curriculum content? So this policy is about curriculum development. Is it about the curriculum management plan and the curriculum content and the curriculum, written, taught, and tested, that's going to get us to the profile of a graduate that's going to produce the graduates?
I think it's one component,
Okay?
because there's so many other experiences and activities other than just the written, taught, tested curriculum.
Okay, so I agree with that. So it needs to go at a higher level. It's in my mind that at some point we were discussing policies that had to do with graduation and graduates and things like that. Maybe it would go there as an exhibit or as part of the policy, I guess.
And then we can reference it within this
And then we can
policy.
reference it in here.
Okay. And then one of the other parts on page 5, under Superintendent, that we received some questions about, relate to the third sentence that says the superintendent shall provide the board an annual review of the curriculum management plan as well as periodic reports of students' academic progress, academic results. And then the questions that came forward, is this annual review presented to the board, and is it consistent with all other statements or plans that we have? And so in looking at that, we have our facilities plan, which leads to our capital plan, and that is a plan that's evaluated or reviewed, annually. And then our other plans, like our compensation plan and that sort of thing, are on an annual basis as well. So, to provide some clarity there. And then there was some wordsmithing done to the beginning sentence under campus level administrators to build in that responsibility for developing and maintaining a positive culture and climate on the campus. And there were other minor revisions throughout. You can see those tracked, but those were the big questions or the big suggested pieces of feedback that came from board members.
Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. Do we have additional questions or comments? Okay. Appreciate that presentation. Thank you for getting all that together. Moving on to 10B, we're going to review the proposed order authorizing the establishment of the Fort Bend ISD Commercial Paper Program. Do we have any presentation on this, Dr. Dupree?
No, ma'am.
We do not have a presentation.
Okay,
We're
do we
just-
have questions or comments by the board members on the commercial paper program? This is James.
So how is what is presented here different from what we saw last month?
The orders themselves are the same. What we did, we put at the end of the agenda item some information that was provided by Mr. Villasenor outlining the controls that are in place for the board in terms of being able to look at the program on an interim basis.
And so that, as my recollection was, and that was in like an annual review, is that correct?
Right. Well, so that's part of it, actually. So what we have on here, and it's at the bottom of page 22 in the book. So we can only use commercial paper as long as there's voted authority. We also can't do commercial paper above the policy that we have. This says 20%. Our fiscal policy has for variable rate debt 25%, but we can't go above that. But most importantly, we can't go above the $100 million that's outstanding. But finally, you'll be able to evaluate the program whenever we come to the board to fix out the commercial paper. We'll show you at that time what the result was of that $100 million, or it's 95 or whatever else. How those costs compare to the costs as if we had fixed out the the expense of that earlier on. And so we'll show that to the board whenever we're asking for the authorization to go to market. And at that time, the board can make the decision whether or not they are okay with us continuing the program.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. Are there additional questions?
Yeah, I just
Mr.
have,
George?
I just have a, one question. It says the issuance of commercial paper notes from time to time thereunder. That means we are passing this for an indefinite time.
Yeah, we plan on having this program in place as long as we have a debt management program.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, the goal is for us to be able to match the invoices that we receive for construction and other bond-related things, to be able to match that with money coming in to reduce our overall cost of carrying. And then as that amount comes up to close to $100 million each time, then we'll come to the board, we'll ask to fix that out either through a variable rate debt issuance or a fixed rate debt issuance, depending on the market and depending on the rest of our portfolio. But once we don't have any other debt authorization,
Sure.
then we will close out that program.
Okay. And you mentioned about two tests, like more than 20% of the debt and
Right.
as much as 100 million is the threshold.
Yeah, 100 million is the most we could have outstanding from a commercial paper perspective, but also our fiscal policy states that we cannot have more than 25% of our debt
20 or
in
25?
Yeah, the fiscal policy is actually 25%. That was what was approved in August by the board.
Sure.
This was a typo. It says 20%. But we can't have more variable rate outstanding than 25% of our total portfolio. And the variable rate that we have now is about 9%.
Okay.
Okay? And so commercial paper is definitely considered to be variable rate debt.
Yes.
And so combined that, we cannot exceed 25%.
Okay. Because I just expressed my concern about this before, of course, variable rates. Do you think 25% is a safe threshold?
I think so, and it's something that the rating agencies have looked at, and consistently what we've seen, the other school districts and other municipalities that have that threshold in the policy, if they go above that, I think that it gets looked at a little bit harder.
Sure.
But it's definitely an industry standard for debt management.
Right. You just mentioned other school districts are
Oh, yes.
doing of our size, kind of.
Yes, sir.
Okay. 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 Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. Mrs. James, do you have another question?
I was just going to double check, since Mr. Frells is here tonight, that the documents have been prepared by his firm and he's reviewed them and find them to be in order.
Mr. Yeah. Is that microphone live? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We did prepare those documents. We do find them to be in order, and we will be ready to move forward as soon as the board has approved the transaction.
Thank you, Mr. Frales. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Bassett. We appreciate it. Moving on to C, proposed resolution for initializing the District of Innovation process. This was brought to us before. We are back to do it again in order to be within the 30-day time limit for the hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Mrs. Martinez, go ahead.
Okay. You have been provided this evening a double-sided sheet that lists some talking points and outlines the process. And you are right, we are coming back to you proposing acceptance of a resolution because of changes in the Commissioner's rules, which require the public hearing to be 30 days, within at least 30 days after the adoption of the resolution. And so we hope to be able to have that hearing in November, provided that the resolution is approved. And so I just would like to walk you through this very, very briefly to show you that as we seek the process to become a district of innovation, I've listed there some terms that are meaningful to us. The plan of innovation would be effective upon board approval and notification of the plan to the commissioner. And the commissioner does not approve or deny the plan. It goes into effect once the board follows all of the steps required and adopts that with a two-thirds majority approval of the plan. However, the commissioner can revoke the plan of a district of innovation if a district has 2 years of not meeting standard or not meeting FIRST, which is the financial integrity rating system of Texas, or and then that he can remove that designation, but he must remove it if that happens for 3 years. So that's important to know. We can also not exceed 5 years, but there is a renewal process. And the innovation plan must provide for certain things, and it must identify certain requirements, and those are listed there for your review. I've also listed the restrictions under the plan, the things that we cannot, statutory requirements that we cannot receive waivers for, and those are listed there for your review as well. I've also listed for you a timeline that shows what we will be bringing to you each month, or the work that we will be doing each month, and it's on the back of the first page. So on your second page, there are 4 points where board action will be required, and this is starting here in October with the adoption of the resolution, and then having that public hearing in November after the adoption of the resolution. And should you determine after the hearing or during that same board meeting to move forward, then that would require board action to say that we are going to become go through the process of becoming a district of innovation, and that you will be initiating a innovation committee to create a local innovation plan. And so part of your homework moving forward from this evening will be due to make that happen, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a bit. And then in January, we will be required to post the plan for 30 days. And then in February, you would need to then vote to notify the commissioner that we would be moving forward and that the board was planning to take a vote on the plan of innovation. And then we take the plan before our district level committee, which in Fort Bend is our Academic Advisory Committee, or the AAC, and they must approve by a majority vote, and then it comes back to the board for that two-thirds majority affirmative vote, after, of course, notifying the commissioner. So that's where your homework comes in preparation for November, following the hearing. Should you decide to move forward and vote to pursue becoming a district of innovation, then we would need to work with that committee, the innovation committee. And there are 34 school districts currently in the state that are districts of innovation. And of those 34 districts, you have districts that have anywhere from 5 members on their committee to 90-plus members in their committee. What we're recommending is that we have a 30-member committee, with each board member recommending 3 people from a cross-section of the community, people that you know are passionate about education, interested in learning more about the statutory requirements and the waivers and how we can be innovative in our approach to helping students, and folks who would be amenable to communicating with other stakeholders and bringing back the voice of the community and sharing our reasons and rationale for moving forward on certain innovations. So we ask that you consider that and think of 3 people you would like to recommend and provide those names by November 1st, and that equals 21, of course, and then we're asking the superintendent to recommend 9 members so that we have that cross-representation of parents, community members, staff members to do the work around identifying what statutory requirements we want to seek waivers for in order to be the vehicle for that strategic plan. What will it take? Are there any innovations that we need, because our work, we cannot accomplish our work in a way in which we need to ensure that our graduates are leaving Fort Bend ISD as we've identified that we believe they should. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Do we have questions from the board members, comments? You have some? Okay. I just have one question. If we have board members that recommend the same person, how do we propose to remedy that?
We would need to seek an additional person.
Okay, so you'll let the
Yes.
2 board members know we can decide who's going to do the recommendation and come up with another one.
Yes.
I just wanted
and-
to make sure we have a process down for that, to make sure that the board members have an opportunity to make sure they're recommending different people and we get a good cross-section.
Yes, absolutely. And one other thing, I'm glad that you brought that up. If you would speak with the committee, with the community members that you're recommending, to make sure that they're able to and want to take part in this process. And then, of course, if we were to get 2 names, then we'll go back to both board members and explain that you need to choose someone else.
And what kind of time commitment should we tell them that they're undertaking if they do this?
Right now, we have 3 committee meetings scheduled, and there's one in January and the other 2 are in December. I can send the specific dates. We're in the timeline that was provided in with last week's board agenda, and I can just pull those dates out and send them back to all of you in this week's board update. And so the 3 committee meetings, and then involvement with board meetings or attending board meetings as we have, seek input from the community in the hearings and that sort of thing. We anticipate that those committee meetings will be 2 to 2.5 hours long in each session. So 7 or 8 hours.
Ms. Helliger?
So what happens if a committee member, for whatever reason, can't? It's 3 years, right, for 3 meetings? Is that what we're saying? Is that
3 meetings? Is
Yeah.
that what you said? I didn't hear your question.
Yeah,
3
2 in
committee
December,
meetings, 2 December.
1 in January.
What happens if someone says that they cannot, fulfill their duties in the middle of this process? How do we replace them?
We would go with the remaining members of the committee, unless the board would like to choose alternates, have, a few alternates that are available and would like to attend to observe the process and be included in the planning and then step forward should somebody need to pull out, they could step forward and become an active member of the committee.
It might not be a bad idea to appoint some alternates in that case, because I wouldn't want the committee to be smaller, I don't think. I don't think we would want to leave a vacancy. Does anyone have any? Okay. So perhaps.
Well, I was thinking almost the opposite. I'm not exactly sure what the committee is going to do, but that 30 is a pretty big group. And, I don't know.
I think it's important.
Go ahead.
I think it's important to have a good number of community meetings. This is major. The nuances of what exemptions from the education code would mean. I think we need to have a good mix of people from the community. I think it's important that we have a good number of people that's involved, and we're not just, represented, vertically.
Right, I agree that we've got to have a good cross-section. I'm not sure what the workload looks like, but if it's a kind of an informational type of thing and give your opinion while you're there, then I think that's reasonable. It just is a very busy time of year, and 2 meetings in December and then winter break and then a meeting in January. It sounds hard for me to convince anybody to do.
So I would expect, just a couple of thoughts, I would expect it'll be a lot like our facilities master planning process, where people come, they learn, process, and then register a perspective. And there might be some reading or a little minor preparation between, but most of the work will be done when you're at the event. And we did talk about doing some form of alternates, but let us give a little more thought to how many we might need. And then we can talk to the board maybe next week again, and maybe kind of share with you kind of our thinking. And when we come down another few weeks, we can talk about that.
Right, because I would think that if we're going to have, if we have members that can't make meetings in December or January, then having some alternates would be even more desirable. Mr. George?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I attended a breakout session in the TASB convention about District of Innovation, and our neighboring district, FBISD, H.D. Chambers was one of the panelists, and so it was very interesting how they selected their committee members. And it's interesting, he said he picked some of the most critics because they have become the most valuable members of that committee. It is pretty interesting how people are doing. So again, I agree with this number, maybe not bigger than that, but somewhere in that vicinity, and also getting ideas from people are already doing it, so our neighbors are doing it. So of course, it was a learning process for me too. I'm still understanding what does this all mean, but good idea. Thank you.
I was gonna, we didn't talk about this, but if you think about if you start with 30, but then we determine that you always have to have a quorum of at least 25 to conduct a vote of any type, then if someone does miss from time to time, because you're never going to have 100% attendance, or we could say we're going to do 35 or something, so, but you just determine you don't vote if you don't have this many at the meeting, then you've got your built-in alternates, and you could have up to 30 voters at any given meeting, or as few as 25, but maybe that's a built-in rule or something like that. Hey, what do you all think about something like that?
I think that's a good way to do it.
I think it's important to, we have so many committees, right? People know what they're getting into, and at least we should explain to them what is expected of them. And like you said, I think that might be a very good idea, how many voters, or if you don't attend, from the beginning only telling them. I think I agree with that. That's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Thank you. Moving on to D, the approval of the Director of Talent Experience as the HR staff member designated pursuant to Section 29022, which is the Senate Bill 507, Special Education Classrooms designee. Any questions about this? Okay, E, reviewing proposed international travel by Bush High School to Edinburgh, Scotland, to the American High School Theater Festival. Any questions? Moving on to F, we have some memorandum of agreement and understanding. First one is participation in the Central Texas Purchasing Alliance and authorization for the superintendent to enter into the agreement. Do we have questions about this? Okay. F2, MOU between University of Houston Clear Lake Center for Autism and Fort Bend ISD. Any questions? This sounds like a good thing. I did send in some questions, and thank you for answering them. I think we can share them with the board members via email, be fine. Number 3, proposed MOU between Fort Bend ISD and Texas Children's Pediatrics for provision of childhood immunizations. Questions about this? Moving along to number 4, resolution authorizing Fort Bend ISD to convey to Fort Bend County the athletic facility located on the campus of Missouri City Middle School, the Missouri City Middle School gym. Do we have questions or comments? I'm very glad this got worked out. It's now with no money transferred in the contract. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. So we're very glad that they're going to take it over. Very glad that the community's going to be able to see the gym restored and use that. So thank you very much for negotiating that for us. Okay, 10G, review the proposed uncollectible property tax accounts. Do we have a presentation on this? Do we have questions about this? Okay. Thank you for being here. 10. Yes. 10H, proposed cash and non-cash donations exceeding $10,000. Wait, let me get to it. What are these? Yes, the Lakeview Auditorium and
Jan Schiff iPad.
Jan Schiff iPads, that's correct. Any questions about these? There's my notes. $55,000 for iPads. Yeah, that's a lot of iPads. 10, are there questions? No, okay. 10I1. These are purchases exceeding $50,000. Our first one is Certica Solutions for the purchase of hosted data validation solution. Do we have questions about this? Okay. Next, Choice Partners for technology equipment, peripherals, and accessories. Questions? Buy board, so it's Cisco IP for phones and accessories. Any questions?
Yeah.
Mr. George?
Yeah, I just have a question there. I mean, how far we are on this voice over IPs? Is that we are using in all schools, or we are in the process of migrating to that program?
Actually, we are fully on voice over IP, sir. These are just replacing the old phones that we have that are breaking.
Okay, we are already
Yes, sir,
finished
we are
that.
fully voice over IP. We are going to convert over the next part is the trunk, which is the actual voice channels that's carried
Sure.
to PRI.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. George. All right, I-5 for HVAC digital control system support. Mrs. James.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. So I submitted a couple of questions on this, and Mr. Perez, I unfortunately didn't get a chance to read your email between whenever you sent it later and now, so I'm just going to ask my questions, so I'm sure to get them answered before our next meeting. So my first question was related, or the first one I'll ask was related to the, in the item, it talks about an average expenditure over the past 3 years of about $820,000, but this request is only for $675,000. So I was wondering what the thinking was behind that.
Yes, ma'am. The average expenditure was based on 3 years, and we had 1 year where we actually exceeded and we expended $1.8 million. And during that year, what occurred was that we had numerous pneumatic systems that were changed out to digital, and so there was that additional cost in doing that. At this point, the work that we're requesting, we do not feel will exceed the 675. Part of the reason is because we are actually going out for an RFQ for this service that will be going out shortly. And so, and then the other part of it is that any of the systems that are going into new campuses those are within the bond 2014 monies, and they also come up with a 1-year warranty period on that. So any work that's done within that year, whoever the vendor is, whether it's Automatic Logic or another vendor, it's covered. So we feel confident that we can stay within the amount of 675.
So you're saying that the part that's on the new construction is outside of this procurement?
Yes, ma'am. This procurement is to take care of all the systems that we have in place. And Automatic Logic has been our sole provider, and they're almost in every building that we have. But what we're looking at doing with the RFP is we would like to have at least 2 providers in order to go ahead and have a little bit of competition as we bid out future work, and also to go ahead and make sure that they stay true and honest to their service. There has been a little bit of a decline in their service, and so we want to go ahead and keep them honest.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Mr. Perez. Okay, 10I5 is for water treatment services. Do you have questions, Mrs. James?
So this is my other one, because I actually was a little confused about the between the last item and this item, but I think I've got it straight in my mind now. And in my question that I sent in, I referenced, I thought we had some sort of in-house program where we were doing this kind of maintenance in-house. And I wonder if that's true, and then if we're still doing that, and and this is in supplement, or if you could explain that to me.
Yes, ma'am, and I had to go back and look, and there was a plan that was brought to the board previously, but within that plan, the water treatment was not part of that. The plan did include automated logic in that end, but the water treatment was not part, and so this is required because we need this in order to go ahead and get our cooling towers in order. We've noticed that there's been a decline in our PMs, and so we want to bring this service on to be able to keep all our water. These are all the cooling towers that are water cooled, not the air cooled towers, but we can go ahead and put them on a preventive maintenance.
Okay, so I'm definitely in favor of that and keeping up with the maintenance, and so thank you for organizing all of that. And I guess then my question would be, and maybe it's in the email, but my question would be, what is that, and you don't have to answer it now, but what is that plan that in the past was previously board approved, and do we need to unapprove it or create a new plan to be approved? Because I remember it kind of being a several-year thing, and I remember it being involving this area and some of the maintenance. So you don't have to answer that right now, but I'm just wondering if that information could be gathered, please.
Yes, ma'am, and I would like to just answer very quickly because, as I said, I was not familiar with the plan, but I looked it up and there is a plan. So I would like to go ahead and study that and then bring it back to you all with my recommendation on how we move forward.
Okay, I think that sounds like it would be a good idea. Especially if the board's approved a plan that we're not doing,
Right.
then or maybe we're doing parts of it or selective parts of it, so then it'd be better that we either rescind that and let that be a management decisions, or we just handle that in the right governance level is what I'm getting for, because I think when this was done before, it was maybe wading into the weeds a little bit.
A little bit, it sounds that way. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Perez. If you'll pull that and we can get something out to us, or maybe even bring it back for more discussion.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, on to number 6, lawn maintenance and landscaping services. Questions? Mrs. James?
Yes, okay, so in part of the recommendation for this item, it talks about the superintendent negotiating and executing the contracts with subsequent renewals. And I wasn't sure what that exactly meant, because I didn't see exactly, and it might be in here, how many renewals there were, and then what about the dollar amount, because there's a dollar amount, it's broken between 3 different vendors. How is that handled in this item?
I'll just address it really quick. It's really similar to what we generally do. If you look on page 321, there's one contract with 4 annual renewal options, and then the amount would not exceed the $1.3 million annually.
Okay, so we've decided that if it's going to be under that amount in this 5-year period, then it just carries on. If it's going to be over that amount, then it's going to come back to us.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Kristen, or Mr. Perez, who maintains the school sites that we own but currently do not have a building on? Are these a part of the properties that they'll be maintaining?
Yes, sir. Our folks only maintain the athletics fields, and then this maintains the rest of the properties.
Okay.
And it's divided into 3 zones.
And so if we have a property that, like we have in Oleana, that doesn't currently have a school on it, they're going to service this as a regular maintenance item, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Helliger?
So same with the property that's over there in the Shadow Creek area?
I need to check on that. I don't want to commit to that because I'm not certain.
If you could find out and provide that to us in an email response this week, that would be helpful. Okay, moving on to item 7, installation of piers for various scoreboards. Board member questions. Oh, we were so close. This is James.
All right, well,
I'm only teasing
free.
you. Ask your question.
if I wasn't asking him, you'd be asking him, Mrs. Tossan, so that, okay, so I had a series of questions around this, but maybe you could just give me a little bit of a narrative, Mr. Perez, because it seemed like we were switching all of these piers to slurry drilling piers, and was that going to be necessary, or were some of them going to be regular and some of them going to be slurry, or how is that going about, and how is this changing our contract with Nevco? I didn't quite understand that from reading.
Yes, ma'am. Nevco was issued a contract back in June of 2015, and they started their pier installation. They've installed 17 different sites and scoreboards and drilled piers and scoreboards at 17 different sites to date. But then in May, they went ahead and they were drilling at Austin High School, and after all this rain that we had, we encountered water at a very shallow water table. Because of that, it required slurry drilling, which was not included in their contract. So we asked for a cost, we stopped, asked for a cost, and the cost that came in was way over our budget. And so we had to just, take a guess that we may encounter this for every remaining pier. Because of that, we decided it would be best to go ahead and just go out for a CSP to go ahead and get the drilling out of Nevco's contract, put it out there, get some competitive pricing, which we did, and we're bringing Joshua Dade back to do just the piers. Nevco will go ahead and still install the scoreboards, but we will be receiving credit back from them for that, the pier drilling that they had to do before, and that will be putting $99,000 back into this project for the drilling.
Okay, so the new firm is doing all the drilling and all the piers, no matter what type of pier drilling is needed, whether it's a slurry site or a regular site.
That is
for lack of
correct, and
better phrasing.
as we drill, those will be monitored. If they do not have to slurry drill, then we'll receive a credit for each one of those. But we've taken the worst case scenario, and in case we were to hit water at each one. But it's ironic, sometimes you'll hit water and you move 10 feet and you don't hit water. It's just a strange phenomenon.
Right, Mr. Rosenthal's an expert in that. Okay, and so the schools that are listed here, these are the ones that the work hasn't been done. You said that at 17 other schools it's already been, or 17 other sites, I should say, it's already been done. This is, the ones that are listed here are the remaining.
Yes, ma'am, that's 14 that are remaining, and we plan on having that completed by January the 20th.
Thank you. And I'm sure you sent me the numbers, so I'll look at that part. And if I have questions, I'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Now 10J, review of the minutes from the previous meetings. Do we have questions or comments about the minutes? Hearing none, we will move on to audience response to any agenda items. Do we have any audience members? Anyone want to comment? Okay, before I hear a motion to adjourn, I again want to thank everyone for coming out to Marshall High School this evening and to help support us in our first listening tour. Thanks again to Dr. Dupree, the executive team, all the staff members, and particularly to Mr. Holland and his team at Marshall High School We really appreciate you. Thanks for helping to make our first one a success. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that this meeting is adjourned.
We stand adjourned.